Humanity had never been more united. The age of division wars fought over borders, beliefs, and flags had long passed. A planetary government, though imperfect, kept the peace. Climate recovery was progressing. Poverty had dropped to record lows. Colonies on Mars and the moons of Jupiter thrived as humanity's first steps into the wider cosmos. The human race had every reason to be hopeful, and then the sky broke. It started with lights, strange distortions in the upper atmosphere that no satellite detected coming in. Entire constellations blinked out in unnatural patterns. Then the thunder followed, not of storms, but of Earth's orbital defense platforms going offline in rapid succession. Without warning, the YVARI Dominion made contact, but not with words or emissaries. Their first message was a kinetic Rodan, unpowered mass, accelerated to near-light speed, that struck New York City with enough force to flatten 5 boroughs and send shockwaves across the Atlantic. Within the first minute, millions were gone. A second rod obliterated Tokyo, followed by directed plasma strikes that turned Nairobi, Buenos Aires, and Berlin into molten ruin. No demands, no ultimatum, it's just systematic annihilation. The YVARI were not like the other alien races humanity had only begun to detect. They were old, ruthless, and bound by a simple creed: purge threats before they evolve. The Dominion had watched Earth grow, calculating its trajectory. And when their predictions hinted that humanity might someday challenge galactic power structures, they acted. Earth was declared a proto-threat. Sentence: extinction. Humanity was unprepared. Earth's orbital fleet consisted of a few patrol corvettes, science vessels, and early-generation warships, none of which could match the sheer scale of the YVARI dreadnoughts. What resistance did occur was valiant but brief. Fighter squadrons scrambled from bunkers in Alaska and Siberia, only to be vaporized mid-flight. The few planetary defense cannons were overwhelmed within the hour. Panic spread faster than the flames. Cities fell into chaos. Communications collapsed. People fled, but there was nowhere to run not when fire fell from above and death came. From orbit, hospitals overflowed, then burned. Governments sent final broadcasts, desperate pleas that quickly devolved into static. In those hours, humanity cried. The kind of crying that shook the soul, the kind that echoed in shelters and the dark in the last calls to loved ones. Parents held children in trembling arms, whispering empty assurances while watching mushrooming clouds grow on the horizon. Soldiers died screaming. Scientists died pleading. Civilians died not understanding why. But amid the tears and loss, something ancient stirred. A seed planted deep in the DNA of a species forged in hardship. It was not just the instinct to survive, was the instinct to remember. Aboard hidden research stations orbiting Neptune, engineers watched in horror. On Mars, colonists observed Earth's destruction from afar, powerless and grieving. Not all had been wiped out. Deep beneath the Rockies, under Antarctica's ice, in black site bunkers built for hypothetical catastrophes, scattered human leaders, rogue AI networks, and elite survivalists endured. And they remembered. A single encrypted transmission escaped Earth's death zona. Looping signal barely powerful enough to reach the outer colonies. They've come. Earth is burning. It's not the end. Survive. Remember, we will rise again. The YVAR, I believed the mission was complete. Satellites showed no organized defense left, no major population centers intact. Satisfied, they began their retreat. Recording Earth as another successful purge, the Dominion moved on, confident it had eliminated a potential threat. They were wrong in reality. They'd struck the match on a fire that would not burn out. They had inflicted a wound so deep it would never fully heal, but it would harden, it would scar. And those scars would become blueprints not just of vengeance but of transformation. This was not humanity's extinction. It was the ignition of something far worse for the Dominion. Humanity with nothing left to lose. The day the sky bled, Earth cried. The Earth was dead, but not all of humanity with it, far beyond the wreckage of their homeworld. In outposts scattered across the solar system, the remnants of the human race stood in stunned silence. Mars, Luna, Europa, Titan, and even deep space. Mining stations had all watched the disaster unfold in horror. They'd seen Earth, the cradle of their kind, go dark in real dash time. And yet, from this overwhelming grief, something began to form. A collective whisper turned into a quiet vow. The survivors had no illusions. Earth was lost. Billions were dead. The old governments were ash. The human race had no fleet capable of striking back. But humanity had something the Wyvar did not calculate. Rage that simmers, not explodes. And a species that does not forget. The survivors didn't retreat into despair. They retreated into purpose, reconstruction in the void in Mars. The Martian coalitioner, engineering and engineering focused, civilian alliance quickly transitioned into a military-industrial machine. Underground bunkers were converted into weapons labs. The terraforming project was paused. Every ounce of atmospheric processor, every reactor, every rover and AI assistant was reassigned to one objective: prepare for war. On Ceres and other asteroid colonies, mining guilds began extracting metals not for commerce but for hulls and armor plating. Entire mining fleets were retrofitted into crude but effective shipyards. Civilians were drafted, trained, and hardened in low-gravity boot camps. The Beltborn, those who had never set foot on Earth, became especially zealous. For them, Earth was sacred, not because they had lived there, but because it had always represented the heart of humanity. Its destruction wasn't just genocide, it was blasphemy. Some of the most transformative developments came from the dark side of Europa, where deep science teams repurposed biological research stations into biomechanical integration labs. Human brains damaged by trauma were rebuilt with neural mesh. Limbs lost in mining accidents were replaced with servos and exoskeletons. Psychological trauma was treated not with therapy, but with combat programming. The result was the beginning of a new breed of soldier, human in origin, but no longer bound by the weaknesses of flesh alone. The AI packed during the initial attack. Earth's AI systems had gone dark, obeying emergency blackout protocols. But in the aftermath, some of these artificial minds reactivated from backup nodes in the outer system. The eyes, particularly the semi-sentient defense, while Gosnells like Revenet and Tyr. I had evaluated the threat and reached the same conclusion. As their human creators, the Avari had not destroyed a threat. They had provoked a far greater one, in an unprecedented move. The surviving humans and rogue AI systems signed the Athena Accords, a formal pact of cooperation. AI fleets would guide human engineers in designing faster-than-light prototypes. Human creativity would guide AI efficiency. Together, they would prepare. Time was their weapon. 50 years of fire. The rebuilding wasn't measured in months. It was measured in generations of obsession. Children born in Martian forges and asteroid labs were raised with a singular purpose: restore what was lost. Education revolved around engineering, orbital combat, and alien anatomy. History books opened. With the destruction of Earth, school songs were oaths of vengeance. Survival was no longer enough. No, survival was a foundation. The next step was evolution. The new human war doctrine was brutal, efficient, and unlike anything the galaxy had seen. Their engineers didn't waste time on elegance. Human warships were jagged, ugly, built for redundancy and destruction. While the Avari relied on clean energy and centralized targeting arrays, the new Terran fleet used decentralized AI swarms, rail cannons, and magnetized tungsten ordnance. Humanity didn't want elegance. They wanted revenge. Whispers in the dark, though. Avari Dominion remained unaware. In their arrogance, they considered the mission complete and had moved on to culling another proto-threat species near the galactic rim. But in quiet corners of space, Avari scouts started disappearing. Listening posts went silent. Troll. Routes turned into graveyards of shredded metal. There were no survivors. Only twisted remnant scars left in vacuum like brushstrokes of hate. At first, the Dominion dismissed these events as anomalies. Pirate activity, mechanical failure, space debris. But one fleet commander reported as strange. Flickering message left on the hull of a derelict scout ship. We remember Earth, and we are coming. Shortly after that transmission was received, the commander's ship vanished too. Conclusion. Of Part 2, humanity had not been defeated. It had been reforged, tempered in ash, sharpened in silence, and polished with grief. The galaxy had seen human tears. It had yet to see what would come from them. For most of the galaxy, the destruction of Earth was little more than a historical footnote, a grim lesson in Wyvar dominance. The Dominion had moved on, continuing its mission of sterilizing emerging threats, never realizing that the true threat wasn't what they destroyed, but what they left behind. From the silence of the void, humanity returned, not with announcements or ambassadors, but with black ships, dead comes, and a fury that spanned generations. The first contact came at the Veltraxis outpost, a fringe. Ivari listening station orbiting a brown dwarf. The station monitored outer system anomalies and reported minor spatial disturbances before going completely dark. A Dominion patrol sent to investigate found only wreckage. The station split into halves, as though torn by invisible claws. There were no escape pods, no bodies. Just a single symbol carved into the outer hull of the command ring, an outline. Of Earth, within days, other remote stations met the same fate. Patrol ships vanished. Trade convoys were reduced to drifting husks. Whispers of a phantom fleet began spreading through the Dominion's outer colonies. They had no idea they were witnessing the first phase of the Terran. Counterstrike. The Revenant appears the first human ship to be really seen in nearly 5 decades, was a vessel unlike anything in the Dominion's archives. It was called the Revenant. The ship was vast, blocky, scarred, and completely silent. Its hull was made of layered tungsten and ferrocarbon, armored thick enough to shrug off fusion strikes. Rail cannons, the size of skyscrapers, lined its flanks. And instead of conventional propulsion, it used an AI-managed gravitational wake systems, allowing it to move like a phantom between systems. The Dominion fleet sent to intercept its 7 warships strong open fire without hesitation. They didn't last 3 minutes. The Revenant didn't use shields, didn't need them. Every shot it fired was a statement. Its main gun, nicknamed Tears of Earth, launched solid rods at relativistic speeds, each capable of splitting destroyers in 2. One Dominion battleship attempted to retreat, only to find its navigation overridden. The last message its crew received was a human voice, flat and cold, for Nairobi, for home. Then came silence and, then nothing. A war of shadows and ghosts. The Terran fleet didn't wage war like the Dominion. They didn't announce their targets or engage in open fleet battles. They hunted. Human ships moved in cloaked formations using gravitational distortion and AI interference to appear only when it was too late. Entire Ivari colonies were evacuated before anyone understood what was happening. Terran ground troops, enhanced cyborgs clad in reactive armor, descended, like nightmares from orbit, eliminating targets with brutal efficiency. They didn't take prisoners. Worse still, they recorded everything. Before retreating from a mission, Terran ships would leave behind transmission beacons broadcasting footage of Wyvari cities burning, overlaid with archival footage from Earth's destruction. Cities like Berlin, Tokyo, Nairobi juxtaposed against Dominion capitals as they fell. Each video ended the same way. A single sentence in every major galactic language. You remember. Do you? The psychological war begins while the Dominion still had superior numbers and technology in some areas. The psychological war had already been lost. The Ivari had never faced an enemy like this. Other species broke under fear. Others surrendered, begged, made deals. Humanity did none of these. They didn't talk. They didn't negotiate. They didn't even broadcast demands. They simply showed up in the night. In the dark, in the places Dominion thought safe, and they destroyed Ivari. Soldiers began going wall. Civilians in outer colonies fled toward the core systems. Entire command fleets were paralyzed by paranoia, scanning constantly for signals. Phantom echoes, impossible sensor returns. In the Dominion capital, A new term began to spread among the political elite and military brass alike. The dead have returned. The message of the fallen on the wreck of an Avari dreadnought destroyed in the Kellan abyss. Dominion salvage teams found something strange amid the debris. An escape pod had been launched just before the ship exploded. Inside was a single human corpse, perfectly preserved in CRYOSTA. In the pod was also a small device that projected a hologram of Earth Beautiful, blue and green. A message played on repeat, spoken by an elderly voice recorded decades ago, perhaps from just before Earth fell. We were explorers. We were builders. You made us destroyers. But we will not stop until our tears become yours. This is only the beginning. Conclusion of Part 3, the YVAR. I had made a critical mistake. They believed humanity to be dead, but humanity wasn't gone. It had been waiting, training, forging itself in fire and grief. And now, it returned not as diplomats or survivors, but as executioners. They were ghosts with warships. By the time humanity's war against the Wyvern Dominion entered its second phase, the original survivors of Earth's fall had grown old. Many now commanding fleets were serving as political leaders in the newly formed Terran Vengeance Concord. But the war was no longer theirs. It belonged to their children. These were the Grudgeburn, humans raised not in cities or on green worlds, but in bunkers carved from moons, in war academies beneath Martian dust, on asteroid colonies illuminated only by artificial sun lamps. Their bedtime stories were battle reports. Their lullabies were the last transmissions from a dying Earth. Their education was laced with rage and sharpened with purpose, where the survivors of Earth had mourned, Grudgeborn had trained. They didn't carry grief. They carried the mission childhood in the ashes from the moment they could walk. Children on the outer colonies were enrolled in directive schools designed around one guiding principle: never again. They were taught that peace is a luxury, but preparedness is survival. History was not memorized, it was felt. Before age 10, every child had watched the original invasion footage. By 12, they could list every city that had fallen and how. Many lives were lost there. Language classes included YVARI dialects not for diplomacy, but for battlefield commands and interrogation. Science lessons focused on anatomy weak points, reactor destabilization, and gravity warfare. PE consisted of zero-G combat, armor drills, and survival runs through irradiated simulations of old Earth's ruined cities. A child raised on Luna might never see rain, never smell a forest, never step on grass, but they could disassemble a rifle blindfolded in 16 seconds, pilot a single-man fighter, navigate by starlight. They weren't trained to live. They were trained to finish what their ancestors had started. Humanity's new face. The Terran Vengeance Concord was more than a government tit. It was a singular purpose given form. It wasn't bound by national lines or old ideologies. There were no borders, no party systems. Every citizen had one goal: ensure that no species could ever again do what was done to Earth. The Terran fleet grew monstrous in size and design. Their warships became floating cathedrals of rage, lined with names of the fallen, engraved with the coordinates of destroyed cities. Each vessel bore scars from its own creation, jagged welds, intentional asymmetries, and armor plating built not for looks, but to intimidate. And the soldiers within were no less fearsome. Grudgeborn Marines wore exosuits, nicknamed Wraiths, powered by hybrid fusion cores, and equipped with adaptive AI for combat autonomy. Their helmets had no visors, just blank chrome plates that reflected the terrified faces of their enemies. When a Dominion fleet detected a Terran signal, fear didn't come from the weaponry. It came from the silence that followed, because Terrans didn't demand surrender. They didn't send ultimatums. They arrived. They ended things. A reputation written in blood news of humanity's return spread across the galaxy like wildfire, especially among Dominion client races. Many species who had once aligned with the YVARI out of fear began reconsidering their loyalty. Several minor races attempted to broker peace with the Terrans, but the humans answered with a unified response. You watched Earth burn. Now you will watch them fall. The YVARI, stunned by the speed and savagery of Terran strikes, found their core territory under siege by a species they had presumed extinct. They scrambled to adapt, but Dominion bureaucracy and arrogance worked against them. Their generals, trained to dominate, now played defense. Their soldiers, conditioned to suppress, now fled. Human war tactics evolved with each encounter. Grudgeborn commanders pioneered psychological warfare campaigns, infecting enemy communications with distorted Earth lullabies. Dominion troops would hear twinkle, twinkle, little star echoing through their base intercom seconds before the walls came down. Entire cities were leveled, not for strategy, but for message. You thought we were broken. We were becoming, beyond revenge not. All humans were blinded by hatred. A growing movement within the Concord asked hard questions. When does justice become cruelty? How far is too far? Is this war for the dead or for the living? But the Grudgeborn had their answer ready. They pointed to Earth, to the billions lost, to the silence that followed the screaming, and they replied, we will stop when they feel what we felt. Not before, not ever. The edge of collapse, the Avari were dying, not just in battles, but in spirit. Their species, once dominant and proud, was cracking under the pressure of relentless generational vengeance. Their allies abandoned them. Their colonies revolted. Their own civilians whispered of the Ashmen Terran soldiers, who came from the void and left nothing behind. The Dominion was no longer feared. Humanity was. The YVARI Dominion, once a galactic superpower spanning thousands of systems, stood on the edge of collapse. Their fleets had been shattered. Their colonies were in revolt. Their political leadership had fragmented into bitter factions, some calling for surrender, others begging for diplomacy. Had a few deluded enough to demand vengeance against the humans? But there was no room for vengeance. There was only reckoning. For decades, humanity had hunted them, system by system, erasing. Every outpost, shipyard, fortress, and capital world that had once helped orchestrate Earth's destruction. Entire star systems were turned into void zones, stripped of infrastructure, seeded with dormant AI sentinels that vaporized any YVARI ship that dared return. And then humanity came for the heart. The fall of Velraxis YVARI homeworld Velraxis had stood for millennia. A jewel of galactic civilization, towering spires, oceans of glass, orbiting rings filled with museums, shrines, and arcane science complexes. It was protected by the largest defense grid in the known galaxy. None of it mattered. When the Terran Vengeance Concord launched its final assault, it wasn't just with ships, it was with everything. Every fleet. Every enhanced soldier. Every AI warform. Even civilians, those who had lost too much to sit by, volunteered for the last push. They didn't want conquest. They wanted closure. The Terran assault lasted less than a week. The defense grid folded under precision orbital strikes. Plasma barriers melted. Tyrevari cities were disabled by atmospheric EMP storms triggered from orbit. Terran dropships pierced the skies like thunderbolts, delivering Grudgeborn squads who fought like machines, silent, calculated, relentless. Ivari soldiers surrendered en masse. Their leaders tried to hide. The humans found them, not to kill them, but to show them. The broadcastin', the ruins of the YVARI High Council Chamber, General Raya Voss, a second-generation survivor born on Mars, stood before a live galaxy-wide broadcast. She wore no medals, no crown, just a simple black combat suit with a patch bearing Earth's shattered countenance in red. The camera drones hovered as she spoke, transmitting her words to every corner of the Galaxy Dominion survivors, neutral species, even human allies. Her voice was steady. We are not here to rule. We're not here to rebuild what you broke. We're here to finish what you started. You hurt humanity once thinking you would erase us. But from our ashes, we rose. And now, you weep. Because you finally understand what we became. She paused. Then she walked away. Behind her, construction drones descended from orbit. Not to terraform, but to build monuments. Ash and steel across the remains of Valraxis. Humanity built shrines not for glory, but for memory in every former. Ivari City, a structure, was raised. Simple in shape, brutal in tone. A block of black alloy, with one name and one date per panel. New York, 14.03, 1 AE. Lagos, Santiago, Beijing, London. Each monument bore a single inscription, in all galactic tongues. We do not forget. They weren't just reminders to the Ivari, they were warnings to the galaxy. What came after the Terran Vengeance Concord did not colonize Valraxis. After the last monument was placed, the planet was evacuated.
Ow.
Its orbital space was sealed. With defense satellites, no species, not even humans, could approach without authorization. The world was left in silence. It became a galactic pilgrimage site, a place of mourning, not just for humans, but for countless others who had suffered under Dominion tyranny. Some came to weep, others to understand. The YVARI themselves, what few remained, were not enslaved or executed. They were scattered, watched, and left to wrestle with the consequences of their past. Some formed peace cults. Others descended into madness. None forgot. The new humanity with vengeance complete, humanity faced a strange new question. What now? The generations forged. In rage now stood, in a galaxy they had reshaped. Some called for peace. Others feared humanity would become the very empire it had fought to destroy. But leadership within the Concord chose a different path. They created the Memoriam Accord, a binding law stating that no Terran fleet would wage war without just cause, that no planet would ever again suffer as Earth had, that knowledge, not domination, would be humanity's legacy moving forward. But always, they warned, if you threaten us, if you raise your hand against the innocent, we will remember, and we will return. Conclusion of Part 5, the war had ended, but its echoes would last for generations. The galaxy now knew the cost of hurting humanity, not just in ships and soldiers, but in tears, in legacy, in the quiet dread of knowing that if the Terrans ever weep again, someone, somewhere, will pay for it. With monuments of ash,